Is everyone ready? You all tell me when you're ready. Good morning, everyone. Sean Hornbuckle, Minority Leader of the West Virginia Legislative Democratic Caucus. Me and my caucus, we come to you today on day 55 of this legislative session to talk about a total lack of transparency and trust. A total lack of transparency and trust. It was last week on day 51 when we dove into our budget and we found out, just like all of you all out there, that we have $456 million of mismanagement. $456 million of mismanagement. My caucus, as we were shocked like all of us in the state were, we took the rest of last week and over the weekend to do our research and find out just what happened. And I am ashamed to say this mismanagement stems from the underfunding of public education. Public education is something that we have led the charge on for years, time and time again, about our need to fund it and our need to pay attention to it. And this is what has led to this mismanagement of $456 million in our budget. And we are afraid that we're in dire times. I will hand it over to Delegate John Williams to talk a little bit more about that mismanagement.
Thank you, Sean. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think of the West Virginia family sitting around the kitchen table. They've got the checkbook out, they've got the computer out, paying their monthly bills, and they've got this huge expenditure coming up. And the husband sheepishly says, right before they go to pay that bill, hey, about 10% of our budget, I don't know if we have access to these funds or not, if we're going to be able to pay it. If you apply that same type of thinking to where we are with our budget right now, that is essentially the same thing. You have $456 million that just essentially we don't know if we're going to be able to use or not. Now, we're hearing different things, that we won't have to pay it back and that we will be fine with this money. Well, if that's the case, why pass this so-called skinny budget? There were priorities that were laid out at the beginning of the legislative session, including pay raises, child care. Those entities, child care didn't lose $456 million. Child care centers didn't. Our teachers didn't lose $456 million. So they are going to be punished and told these assurances, hey, don't worry about it. We'll come back in May and fix it. Well, we're here for 60 days. Even if we do come back in May to fix it, we had a job to do these 60 days and we haven't done it. And so where we are right now is we're in a position where we want to see a budget that is funded, that keeps the promises that were made on day one during the State of the State some 55 days ago. And with that, I'll pass it along to my colleague, Kayla Young.
Good morning, everyone. So I want to talk about what's not in the budget. We're going to see the Senate bill version of the budget. We expect to put the House budget into that budget. But between all of you working on the House budget alone, what's not in there? Childcare is not in there. Childcare was the #1 priority of our caucus. It was the #1 priority of the majority caucus, yet we're not seeing any funding for childcare at all. We want to restore some of the governor's promises. We want to make sure that states getting their $50 million agriculture lab that isn't in this budget. The rural hospital money for deferred maintenance that our hospitals so desperately need, it's not in this budget. There's no more funding for our foster care crisis or our CPS crisis. They're not even fully funding dual enrollment in the House version of the budget. There's no cost of living adjustment for retirees that our caucus has fought for years and years, and our retirees still aren't getting any more funding that they desperately need with inflation rising. There's no PEIA subsidy. There is a pay increase for our state workers, for all of our state workers, our troopers, our teachers, our non-correction employees, and just a general pay raise. But that pay raise isn't going to be offset by the PEIA reimbursement that's coming up when they're expected to spend 10% more this year, next year, and the year after. So the last few days of this session, we're on day 55 today, the last few days, our caucus is absolutely committed to focusing on the people of West Virginia and putting our money where our mouth is. And with that, we'll take some questions.
The governor's office put out a statement this weekend stating that they didn't even know about this until Michelle Glatt became superintendent, but the documentation seems to show that they have known about this at least since Clayton Burge. I didn't know if there was any reaction to the governor's statement this weekend on this and exactly when they knew what they knew.
Well, it looks like from the documents, I think you might have seen them too, Stephen, that there was a application for a waiver that was applied for, I believe, back in 22. All right, in 22. And so we are dealing with the same situation. So there has been no guidelines that have changed. Everything has remained the same since then. And so to that question, it's already happened before. We are demanding answers right now. Again, I said it before, the people of West Virginia deserve transparency and be able to have a government that they can trust. I also want to remind West Virginians that is why we, right now, as House Democrats, want to be able to control the agenda. We currently do not. We don't set the agenda. We don't get to label the priorities for the state of West Virginia. And so that's why we're desperately wanting to do that.
I mean, I guess with 2024, the waivers, they did a waiver in 24 for 22, fiscal year 22. And I was kind of wondering, I mean, we already been there before. Was that something that was ever brought up to y'all lawmakers? Like, hey, we did this waiver already once. Like, why? I'm just trying to work out how this is a blind side for everybody.
It's a blind side for us. It's a blind side for you. But it's not a blind side for the people that are in charge. All right. And that's what it comes down to. That's why I said time and time again, we want the ability to be able to be entrusted with the agenda and to set that, because it's important that you're in on this. Again, we just found out, it was actually through the good questioning of Delegate Larry Rowe in a finance committee, that we found out these items. We weren't going to find them out until day 51 when he was asking questions in committee. And then I will give credit to Chairman Vernon Chris that he let us know what was going on. But until then, we didn't know.
Where's the Social Security cut stand?
Well, Social Security stand right now, it's there. But again, we've got to figure out this mismanagement first. We're really troubled by it. It's in our House version of the budget. But we got to make sure that we get it across the goal line, Randy.
Have you heard any
Well, first and foremost, I will give credit as well. So the negotiations are going on, and we don't think that we're going to have to cut anything. All right. Again, those negotiations are going on. They might allow us to push it to fiscal year 2026 for some of that spending to make this year's budget whole. But again, I think Delegate John Williams said it best. Why are we passing a skinny budget right now? We have it. It was mismanagement on our part as a legislature, but we need to go ahead and do it right now.
I will say that there's the difference between the House version of the budget and the governor's introduced version of the budget does have significant cuts to State Board of Education in it.
Cuts in the Department of Education as well.
That's right.
Jobs and Hope and those other programs.
Yeah, that's
Could
right.
you go back over the teachers' pay? You said you guys, teachers will get a pay raise or they will not. Could you clarify that?
So the teacher's pay raise was not in the Senate version of the budget, but the teacher's pay raise is in the House version of the budget. And I believe the Senate is set to take up that bill this afternoon. So it sounds like that might be working its way back into the budget. But we've always stood for teacher pay raises.
Anything else?
You feel like the governor's not standing behind his promises? So what's going on here?
That's for you all, as people of West Virginia, to decide. We've heard things time and time again. Now, some things he has come true on, right? But there's some other things that we are still asking for. And so I think that's up to the people of West Virginia to decipher what they're seeing and what they're hearing.
The governor came out first night of the session. I don't think we've seen him since then. Might be over at the girls' basketball tournament. But this is a fairly important week. This is when we're deliberating on the budget. He came out and made some promises during the State of the State, whether it was funding childcare. He even talked about funding these crisis pregnancy centers. He talked about $50 million to state for their agriculture facility. Yet he knew that this was coming because somebody at his office was very bad at math and didn't keep up that percentage for funding for public education. And they obviously knew this was coming or they wouldn't have applied for a waiver back in June of 22. So because of their failure to do math, they're failing the state of West Virginia, and now we're on the hook for almost $500 million.
Anybody else? Got anything else?
Well, I think we will end it on that. We appreciate you all. See you soon.
Thank you.